just to show a sense that, when we talk about being good people by being monogamous versus polygamous, you talk about different species and oxytocin and testosterone and vasopressin receptor levels. And why don't you talk about what happened? I was going to quote it, but you can talk about polygamous rodent species versus monogamous rodent species. And I found this once again fascinating when you think about this. What we impose as a moral issue now is biology.
And biological.
Yeah.
This is like irresistible and so much fun to teach about. Voles. Voles are these little vole things that run around, and there's all these different subtypes. And there are mountain voles and prairie voles in the great American West. And they turn out, despite having 99% of their genes in common, they have very, very different social systems, in that prairie voles are monogamous. They form pair bonds. And mountain voles are polygamous. And I always have to remember when I'm teaching this, okay, which one is it? Garrison Keillor. Garrison Keillor talks about the great American values out in Wobegon and stuff. That's in the prairie. It's the prairie voles who are monogamous. They turn out not to be, but that's what I always have to remember before I mess them up. So, wow, how'd that happen? Because they're so closely related. And incredibly cool work by like a bunch of neuroscientists over the last couple of decades have completely unpacked that system. When you are a male vole of either species and you're mating, you release this hormone vasopressin from one part of your brain. And what it does is it buzzes a part of your brain having to do with reward. And whoa, they just explained sex feels good. And then it turns out that because of just a gene duplication event, a change in a promoter on a gene, in other words, stuff that like dead white males in lab coats and molecular biology can explain, in the prairie voles, the receptor for vasopressin is more widespread and responsive than the receptor in the mountain voles. So for the same sex act, they get a whole lot more of a buzz. And at that point, like basic behaviorism takes over. Wow, that was great. I think I'll stick around. And instead, mountain voles are nomadic, the males there, and they're like gone the next day. Okay, how do you know this? How do you know this? One of those experiments where like people's mouths have to drop open, brilliant like molecular manipulation, take the prairie vole version of this gene and plunk it down into mountain voles, and you make them monogamous. You make them monogamous.
It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of thing I love. I mean, you can't argue with that, right? That's what's great about it.
Yeah. And okay, so what about us? And what about us? And aren't we monogamous? But what about divorce rates? And what about most societies allow polygamy? And there's incredibly convincing evolutionary biology showing that among all the primates, we're right in the middle. We're like halfway between being a classic pair bonding monogamous species and a polygamous one. And there's all sorts of interesting ways you can show that. But in terms of this, say, okay, so which version, what kind of vole are we? And it turns out we have different variants. Some of us have one kind, some of us have another. And that's predictive of things like how stable of relationships you form. That's predictive of things like how close you stand to an attractive person if you're already in a relationship. Oh my God. It's the same stuff. It's like the same stuff that before it's over with is produced like sonnets or divorce lawyers. So there's very human specific aspects to it. But whoa, even that is ultimately mechanistic.